Dedicated, determined, dependable. Your 6 o'clock news. Fox 5 News starts now. You heard about this simmering controversy first on Fox 5. Tonight, Emory students take to the streets to make sure their voices are heard.
Well, Emory students take their concerns over a newspaper column to the streets.
What do we want? Unity! What do we want it? Now! What do we want?
Coming up new at 6:30 tonight, students question why the article was even printed in the school's newspaper. A protest march today at Emory University focused on student outrage over the writings of a campus commentator. Fox 5's Paul Yates spoke to students and a university professor about the reaction to a college newspaper editorial raising the issues of race and intelligence.
Unity! Now!
Emory University students march across campus, protesting a college newspaper column. A column that revived a much maligned, decades-old, genetically based theory of black intellectual inferiority. Today, the Black Students Alliance here criticized the editorial policies of the Emory Wheel newspaper, which published the student writer's opinion essay last Friday.
We just feel as though anything that violates our human rights as students of the Emory community and faculty of this community needs to be addressed.
The Wheel's editors say they have a policy of not refusing columns because of the issues they address. But other students say an opposing view should have been printed.
I think that it was irresponsible of the paper to just publish one side of the issue. If they wanted to bring this issue to the fore, they should have had both sides of the issue represented.
The editorial has already brought a response from Emory's president, who called the column's conclusions repugnant. Here at the School of Anthropology, they've heard all these theories before.
People have discussed this extensively, not found it very useful, and now he's bringing it up again as if it's something new.
Professor George Armalagos and others have written their own response to the column.
The only useful thing that will come out of this is that racism is still fairly prevalent within our society, and that maybe this will just re-emphasize that point that we have to deal with it in a forthright manner.
What do we want? Unity!
In Atlanta, Paul Yates, Fox 5 News.
Now, we tried without success to contact Mike Polignano, the student who wrote the opinion essay. Emory students scheduled a forum for late today to discuss some of the issues raised by the newspaper column and the controversy surrounding it.
Live from WXI TV in Atlanta, you're watching 11 Alive News at 11.
Racism implies a certain level of hatred, which I don't have towards blacks.
He wrote an article that sparked angry debate, but tonight the author of an article that questioned the intelligence of blacks is defending his story. Hundreds turned out tonight at Emory University to protest and call attention to a controversial article in the student newspaper, the Emory Wheel. The article makes reference to claims that blacks are genetically inferior to whites. Both the paper and the author defended the column despite cries of racism. 11 Alive's Keith Whitney is live at Emory University tonight with more. Keith?
Well, Wes, that column relied heavily on the much-refuted archaic works of Arthur Jensen, who many believe is one of the pioneers of the science of racism, or as others have called it, academic Nazism. Tonight, hundreds turned out to condemn the article that most here considered a slap in the face to academia.
Academic racism is one of the most dangerous kinds of racism because it's where intelligent folks who oftentimes have control about government funding, things like programs get implemented, they dictate the terms of the debate.
I'm going to try to defend a very controversial position.
The student who wrote the column showed up to defend it.
Racism implies a certain level of hatred, which I don't have towards blacks. And, I think if there's, a genetic component and an environmental component, both, to human diversity, then that should be acknowledged.
Despite his comments about how this wasn't a racist, racist mark or a racist set of articles that he wrote, it absolutely, in my opinion, is.
To at least some critics, Arthur Jensen is to blacks what Joseph Mengele was to Jews. But many in this crowd believe no such article would have been permitted using that research.
We are truly a minority, the African-American community here at Emory. There is a very large Jewish population here at Emory, and I do not feel that if there was an article that said that Jews were genetically inferior, no, I don't think that it would have run.
The student editor stands by his decision to run the column.
Once we start picking and choosing which opinions we run based on the opinions in and of themselves, we are no longer credible as a forum for community debate.
Just to give you an idea, Jensen, Mengele, and many others, in fact, over the last century or so, preached something called eugenics. It's a pretty word with a very ugly meaning, basically sterilizing people that are considered to be inferior. The idea that such an archaic and dangerous philosophy could show up at Emory in the new millennium is simply appalling to many here. Live at Emory, Keith Whitney, 11 Live News Tonight.
From WGCL-TV Atlanta, this is Clear News.
The author of a racially charged article in Emory's student newspaper defended his editorial tonight. Michael Jr. Polignano spoke to a student and faculty forum about his editorial from last Friday's edition of The Wheel. In the column, he supports 1970s research that suggests blacks are intellectually inferior to whites because of genetic differences. Polignano told the crowd that he is not a racist and that the purpose of his editorial was to make people aware of this research. Many students, blacks and whites, found the column offensive and says it was irresponsible not to offer another side to the story.
There's always going to be a few isolated cases of ignorance anywhere you go, and I don't think that this article is a reflection of the Emory student body as a whole.
Before tonight's forum, about 200 students, faculty, and staff members marched across campus in protest of the column. They wanted to bring more awareness to racial diversity.